We start this time with the E3 gameplay experience trailer on June 11th, 2014. About halfway through, we see a very brief appearance of our titular topic of today, the last word. We know that it's last word because of the unique ready animation it has, and while there is other weapons that share this unique animation, it isn't in the game until Taken King, therefore it could only be last word. It's never really talked about or even seen again throughout the rest of the trailer, so instead we jump into the launch of Destiny once more. Like I had just mentioned, the last word is the only hand cannon at the time that had this unique ready animation, and is presented as the Cowboy weapon. It's highly encouraged to fire from the hip, and when fired, the player fans the hammer much like that of old revolvers. However, unlike most old revolvers, the barrel is aligned with the bottom of the chamber rather than the more conventional top of the chamber. Very few real-life revolvers were made this way, and this once again makes it a unique case. The Year 1 version of Last Word originally had blue lights on it instead of the now green lights as well. The Last Word's perks were Fan Fire, one of the only cases where full auto trigger was built into the weapon, Hip Fire, better accuracy when firing from the hip, and Last Word, improved stability, target acquisition, and while it doesn't say it, increased damage when firing from the hip. Its Grimoire card reads, "The last word is a romantic weapon, a throwback to simpler times when steady aim and large rounds were enough to dispense justice in the wilds of a lawless frontier. Of course, some might say that time has come again." Year 1 Last Word was a menace in the Crucible when it released. Its aim assist was very strong, and combined with its high damage shots and high rate of fire, it quickly became a nuisance inside of PvP for a very long time. Pre-nerf, it could do over 100 damage for a headshot and very quickly 2-tap any Guardian. Even though it's expected to hip-fire the weapon, there was no penalty really to ADSing, and so people just used it as a regular hand cannon. You did, however, lose the bonus damage from hip firing, but even then that was inconsistent at best, because you could still get the bonus damage even when you were ADSing. One more thing before we get into the lore, we cannot talk about Last Word without also bringing up the ghost bullets it has. Ghost bullets refer to the phenomenon where your crosshair is targeted on somebody, you shoot your gun, and you deal no damage to them, or you'll get a body shot even when you aim at the head. This was a particularly common issue with Last Word given its rate of fire and hipfire encouraged playstyle, at least I assume. I think this was mostly an issue in Destiny 1, but I'm unsure whether it was also in Destiny 2, but had to at least mention the presence of it at least in the past. I think a lot of people already know the story of how Last Word came to be, as it is probably the most well-known lore story throughout the franchise. However, I'll try my best to quickly summarize. There was once a town called Palamon, which was ruled by a struggling tyrant named Loken. A resident of the town, Shin Malfer, noticed a stranger wander into town, and as the stranger waited for Loken to come greet them, Shin would get impatient and went up to greet this man himself. Shin had taken notice of this man's revolver, the last word. The stranger saw this and handed the revolver to Shin. This stranger, who is revealed to be Jaren Ward, would befriend Shin and become his mentor. Jaren took notice of how the towns ran and would confront Loken. During the quarrel, Jaren would utter the famous words of "yours, not mine" to Loken as Loken taunted him, saying along the lines of Jaren's final words. Jaren then drew his revolver quickly and shot Loken in the head, ending his rule. Sometime later, another prominent stranger would wander into this town, this time being Dredgen Yor. Yor wasn't the nicest person, however, and 3 days after his arrival, decided to massacre everyone in town and burn it to the ground. Shin was spared, however, and Yor left him with a smile on his face. Shin would get together with Jaren and some others to seek revenge, and whilst hunting for him, Jaren went off alone to confront Yor and evidently fell to him. His ghost would return to Shin with a letter, which you can read in the description as this is already long enough, and the last word in hand. I don't know how a ghost carries weapons, but nevertheless, the ghost noticed that Shin had the Traveler's Light inside him and gave him the weapon. Shin would later track down Yor to Dwindler's Ridge, where they exchanged words. Yor claimed that he had left the weapon to him to encourage a response and how he had been looking forward to this. It's here that the exchange of the famous words are spoken. Dredgen Yor says, "But here you are, this is truly an end. Shin Malfer, yours, not mine." With his rage combined with clarity, Shin unleashed the last word combined with solar light to make the golden gun, and shot Dredgen Yor dead with the first 2 shots, and once more for good measure. This also means that the golden gun model is largely based off the last word as well. Moving on to the patch notes it's had, we start with September 7th, 2014, increased the base zoom of all hand cannons by 20%, increased the base damage per bullet by range 4 to 15% modified by weapon stat, reduced the base accuracy range by 75 to 100% modified by weapon stat. And yes, I realize that this patch note predates Destiny's launch, however, I feel it wouldn't make much sense to go over patch notes prior to talking about the actual weapon. This will go for any and all future weapons I may cover as well where this patch note is mentioned. On October 14th, 2014, in-air accuracy is increased for hand cannons. On February 25th, 2015, slightly reduced effective range and initial accuracy on hand cannons. At September 8th, 2015, for the last word specifically, reduced range by 10, reduced base stability by 10, increased hip fire accuracy, precision damage aim assist while hip firing is increased, and fixed an issue where the hip fire damage bonus was not applying correctly. For hand cannons in general, damage fall off distance has been reduced to be closer to the player to limit long range lethality. Accuracy in aim down sights reduced slightly, making long range snap shooting less reliable. Accuracy when firing from the hip is reduced. Base optics, aka zoom, reduced so aiming down sights grants more width in favor for depth. Year 1 perks were also nerfed with Taken King, so soft ballistics reduced damage penalty by 50%, smart drift control reduced stability bonus by 40% and reduced range penalty by 33%, aggressive ballistics reduced damage bonus by 50%, increased stability and range penalties by 100%, and perfect balance reduced stability bonus by 40%. The Taken King did bring back the last word to an updated Year 2 version. It stayed identical to Year 1, but that's not the reason I'm mentioning the Taken King. Rather, it has to do with a certain quest involving the last word. Once you reach Strength 3 with the Crucible, you would get a quest from Amanda. This quest was for the exotic, the Chaperone, the first and only slug shotgun in Destiny 1. The only reason I mentioned this quest was because its first step was to acquire Crucible kills and streaks with the last word. You needed to show loyalty or something to Tex Mechanica, and the last word was the only other weapon in the game that was made by Tex Mechanica. It may be surprising to some of you that the Chaperone started its journey in Destiny 1 and not Destiny 2, but that's a weapon we'll go over another day. Spoiler, it wasn't really used all that much inside of Destiny 1 because it just wasn't at all potent. Anyways, on December 8th, 2015, increased ADS accuracy for hand cannons. On April 12th, 2016, the April update officially killed the last word by removing its damage bonus from the last word perk, or rather hip firing. On June 14th, 2016, for hand cannons in general, made damage fall off curves steeper to better coincide with intended effective range of hand cannons. Small increase to PvE damage to all hand cannons, amount depending on enemy class. On February 14th, 2017, for hand cannons in general, significantly increased initial accuracy returns to launch/year 1, reduced base range to 35 meters from 40 meters, reduced aim assist and magnetism at longer ranges, and reduced minimum damage after falloff from 50% to 33%. And on March 28th, 2017, hand cannon range falloff starts around 3 meters earlier. Bungie would release the Black Armory weapons trailer, and at the very end, it's revealed that the last word is making a comeback with its exotic questline, The Draw. Shortly after the release of the Black Armory, a new quest had appeared over at our boy the Drifter. This new quest was called The Draw, and it started out by having to kill Hive with solar damage, 3 Hive bosses, and Hive in general. The next step was to step into the forbidden grounds that is the Crucible, as you needed to kill at least 135 Guardians. However, death would subtract progress, so ending kills would have varied. After the cacophony that is the Crucible, you then needed to rinse yourself off, and were better to do so than the methane seas of Titan. Here, you would complete the mission, The Damnation, where it's essentially a slightly harder lost sector. Next, you are tasked with 4 objectives: killing Prison of Elders wanted escapees in lost sectors, killing Hive with precision damage, completing 3 heroic Hive ritual public events, and finally jumping right back into the Crucible where you needed blood for blood and or best served cold medals, as either killing the enemy player that just killed the most recent teammate in the kill feed, or killing the enemy player that just killed you respectively. After completing those, you finally get access to the mission, The Conversation. In this mission, you're tasked with eliminating the Hive Weapons Master, Enkar. The mission is mostly a modified version of the Broodhold strike until you get to after the crystal part, where you come face to face with the aforementioned hive. To defeat them, you need to use the last word that Shin directly transmits to you, I'll explain later, and shoot the weapon right from the hand of Enkar. Do this 3 times and the mission ends and you get your last word. Like I said, Shin Malphur transmits you the last word. Throughout the quest, you get lorebook fragments, which turn out to be letters from Shin himself. The lorebook is actually quite good, and I encourage you to read it yourself, as it isn't terribly long, but in short, he's trying to make sure you steer away from going down the path of darkness, as it had corrupted Dredgen Yor and his shadows that follow his ways. He gifts you the weapon to use against the hive, and afterwards says to keep it as you've earned it. The weapon has stayed more or less the same, and instead of the last word perk, it's now Fanfire, where hip-fired hits grant stacks of Fanfire, which increase reload and accuracy per stack up to 4 stacks. Precision hip-fired hits deal increased damage as well. On release, this weapon was obviously used in the one place it shines the most, the Crucible. However, there was some conflicting usage with the weapon between mouse and keyboard and controller users. If I remember correctly, mouse and keyboard users had a harder time aiming because of the recoil pattern and such. If someone would like to shed more light on this issue, please do, as I cannot personally attest to how mouse and keyboard felt at launch, nor can I attest to how controller felt either. On March 5th, 2019, fixed an issue where last word's exotic ornament, Laconic, did not display properly in third person. On April 9th, 2019, added a timer to the Fanfire perk for last word. On October 1st, 2019, hand cannon's PvE damage against minor enemies increased by 30%. On December 10th, 2019, fixed an issue where the Laconic ornament for last word was able to be purchased without owning Forsaken. Okay. On March 10th, 2020, for last word, precision scaler adjusted for when hip-firing. Hip-fire only gets a benefit to precision damage as opposed to both ADS and hip-fire. ADSing no longer provides more damage fall-off. Reduced stability on mouse and keyboard. Adjusted how target acquisition is handled on the weapon to improve the experience. And reduced the effective range of the weapon. Adjusted recoil scalers for a lot of weapon types, including hand cannons, for mouse and keyboard users to bring them closer in line with controller users. On May 18th, 2021, fixed an issue where the last word ornaments had different recoil to the base version. On August 24th, 2021, for hand cannons, increased damage against minor enemies by 15%, and also changed how Lucky Pants worked. Now, whenever you ready a loaded hand cannon, each successive shot increases the damage of the next for a short time, obviously worked with last word, and this is how Lucky Pants works now. On January 27th, 2022, fixed an issue where hand cannons would have an empty magazine when loading into an activity. On May 24th, 2022, reduced mouse and keyboard recoil penalty from 33% to 22%. On July 19th, 2022, reduced hip-fire precision aim angle by 50%, and reduced damage and aim assist range fall-off by 3 meters. And apparently for some reason, the last word was somehow dealing more damage in Crucible around this time after this update, dealing 73 damage a headshot instead of the usual 69. I'm unaware if this caused any significant PvP change, however I do know it was covered a bit by PvP Destiny YouTubers. On April 18th, 2023, increased damage of hand cannons against red and orange bar enemies by 20%. On October 3rd, 2023, reduced damage bonus of hand cannons in Checkmate game mode from 10% to 7%. On November 7th, 2023, reduced hand cannon body shot damage inside of Checkmate game mode. On November 28th, 2023, fixed an issue where the camera would shift left when equipping a hand cannon or sidearm. I don't even know how that happens. On January 9th, 2024, for hand cannons, increased body shot damage scaler from -10% to -5% in PvP. On March 5th, 2024, for hand cannons in PvP, increased critical hit damage by 10%, reduced body shot damage by 5%, and reduced flinch dealt to players by projectile impact by 12.5%. On April 9th, 2024, increased last word's base damage by 6% everywhere. On June 4th, 2024, increased damage against red bars by 5% for hand cannons, also reduced screen shake against players on projectile impacts by 33%. In October of 2024, at around this time, last word specifically for some reason was dealing 100 damage crits in Crucible. I have no idea how or why this happened, but it ultimately got disabled soon after until October 22nd, 2024, fixed an issue where the last word was dealing too much damage to people in Crucible, and it's now re-enabled. And finally, with the last big update to the game, we of course get a couple changes to the last word. First, we have a buff to the last word itself with a 10% increase to both aim assist and stability on mouse and keyboard. And last, we have the introduction of a new catalyst. The catalyst simply adds Envious Assassin, where kills with other weapons refill and overflow the magazine, and Killing Wind, where kills with the last word increase mobility, weapon range, and handling for a short time. And with that final addition, that concludes the legacy of the last word. The original cowpoke weapon. Its legacy in the Crucible is nigh unmatched and will always be a staple for PvP. The lore surrounding it as well is a very well known story and a damn good one at that. If you like this series and want to see it continue, let me know, and let me know what exotic you'd like to see next. Until next time, see ya.